Hello everyone, and welcome. The Strange Man series has been one of my favorite series on this channel, from understanding the pain in the Crooked Man and bottling up emotions in the Sandman, to the horror of trauma and how it affects us in the Boogeyman. All of these games have been incredible, so let's cap it off with the final game in this anthology, The Hanged Man. This game was streamed on the channel, and if you would like to check out those streams, they'll be in a playlist below. You can also just check out the live tab for whenever I do another stream. But before I say anything more, this will be your one and only warning. This video will discuss uncomfortable themes and have imagery not suited to a general audience. I may censor some of it at my discretion, but without further ado, let's jump on in to The Hanged Man. We start the game as a kid in a blue winter coat in a snow-covered town. Windows dark with the restful residents. The one store open is a fishing shop where a clerk sits reading a magazine. Looking around the store, our eyes focus on an old fishing rod. The clerk notices and tries to make small talk, but instead of talking, we tear it down and start destroying the pole. Now we're stuck in the manager's office, who is chewing us out about why we did that. He threatens to call the cops when the clerk finds a phone number and address, so the manager takes the card and calls them. That's when we see David, who calls us Will. David is the main protagonist from The Crooked Man, the first game in the series. You can watch this video and the others in the series on my channel. David takes Will outside and asks him if his mom knew he's there. Considering the answer is likely not, he takes him home where he makes him food so they can talk. Will refuses to eat, so David offers to let him sleep in his room for the night. Going upstairs, we can go into the little room and a little mouse pops out of our coat pocket, complaining about how cold it was and explaining that David must be real mad. His name is Pop. After we hear from him, we can look into our inventory. We can find a note that says, "You're a demon child. Someday you'll burn in hell for your sins." The next is a card, which is the Hangman Tarot card. The note is David's address and number. Then we have a pencil case that I'm pretty sure never comes into play meaningfully. Now, for those of you who don't know what a tarot card is, it's something that is often used to try and tell the future or predictions about someone's life. Some tarot cards may reveal how they die, something that'll happen in the near future, or maybe love. Pop suggests that we sleep, but realizes Will is just trying to leave, so he says that he won't stop him, but he disagrees with it. We shimmy out of the window and down a tree to escape the house, where we flee to find a place to stay. Going into the motel, the owner is watching reruns and begrudgingly gives us a key to room 103. Using it, we open the door to find someone is already inside. Sound familiar? If not, you should watch my video on the Boogeyman, where you would know who that is. But we'll see more of him later. Going back to the motel owner, we get a new key to the unoccupied room where we can find the TV and turn it on, and find that it's in the middle of the conversation. "Detective, what should I do? Should I tell my son what that man did? I know he would suffer. I know it would despair, his trust betrayed. I don't want him to suffer when it's so irrational. Hiding it because it's irrational. That's easier said than done. If you want to protect your son from everything irrational in the world, your only hope is to lock him up in a room. But I think your son wants to leave the room, even if it's not logical. He's ready to bear it if it means getting the truth. Go on and tell him everything. This will be a trial for him." After we see this, Pop mentions our dad used to watch this show. After that, Will comes out of the bathroom with a towel to dry himself, then heads to sleep ignoring Pop. The next day, it's 10 a.m. as we go outside and head into town for food from a cafe. Pop tries to order with us as we hear a waitress ask for our order. Looking up, we see a red-headed girl who thinks she's seen us before. Will then does what I believe is the only reasonable thing to do when a woman speaks to you, and bolts out of the restaurant as fast as he can, all the way to the highway. Pop tries to tell Will that they should go back to David's, but Will doesn't want to, while Pop protests how cold it is. Will runs into the forest and starts to go through the brush and snow. We jump down a cliff and come upon a gate that looks like it goes to a prison. To get out of the snow, we sneak in through a crack in the wall and find a grate that we can jump in through. Finding a flashlight, we go through the halls and find a spray can and a sleeping blonde man in a large room with a confession booth. Pop comments it might be a hobo as we go into the confession. Will starts to sit and confess his sins, as Pop acts as a mock priest. We can't hear what he confesses, but Pop says that he doesn't see anything to confess for. Suddenly we see feet beneath the confession booth's curtain, which then walk away. After that, we can exit to the main lobby where we find more doors. One on the left is an office, where we can find a key. We can also find a map on the bulletin of all the buildings in the compound, and we can head upstairs to find some more hallways and rooms. In the first room, we can find a storybook with a note saying, "Collected from room 1508, return to library." The next room, we can find a key and a notebook from an Andy Thorne. Outside the rooms, we can find a new map to see we're in building 1. Upstairs, we can see the first key to open an iron gate and then enter the dining room. This is the point that I actually bothered to read the storybook, named Monster in the Mirror. The monster in the mirror asks, "What is your name? How old are you? Where do you live? What do you like? What do you hate? Are you a good kid? Are you a bad kid? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who's that in the mirror?" I also read the dusty notebook saying, "I've had a new revelation. My past tyranny is why I'm confined here. Now I feel nothing but unease. What awaits me is only ruin. This is the future I desire. The only future I need is one of salvation." In the storage closet, we can look at the broken elevator, but when we try to leave, we can hear footsteps and Pop warns us to hide. I forgot to turn my flashlight off, in which we get shined in the face and found by Keith, who recognizes us from the hotel and starts bombarding us with questions. He tries to lead us out and mentions the place is haunted, then realizes we don't know and elaborate. He explains that he's a detective, and 15 years ago there were 5 people who died here, and after it shut down, dumb kids would come by and come back telling stories of shadows or sobs from within the walls. He then says that the 5 were killed by being hung and having their guts cut open and fall out of them as they hang upside down, in which Keith points to burlap sacks with blood seeping out of them on the wall. This scares Will, and we hear him scream, and then Pop runs away into a crack. Will blames Keith for Pop fleeing and elaborates that Pop wasn't just a pet, but his friend. He yells at him to take responsibility and help, because Keith was the one who threatened him. This was the point in the stream where I found a small annoyance.
One thing I want to state that's kind of like bothering me. See the line on the wall? It was perfectly fine until here where it dips like a pixel.
Keith and Will go back and forth until he says that he won't go looking for some rat and tells us to look for a bit and then scram, since he has business to attend to. Leaving the cafeteria, we can find stairs that lead to a bunch of cell-like rooms of this mental asylum. On each floor, there's multiple rooms and a large bathroom. Trying to go upstairs, we don't see anything. And then again. It's only going down a floor that we notice that it seems to be the same one. Looking at the wall, there's a smudge that looks like it's erased. We can use the spray can to make a circle so we know where we are. Going up, we're on a new floor. Really this time. The third door on our left as we go forward springs out at us with what looks like blood. Inside is a blood stain on the bed with a note underneath. "My beloved Alec, I heard you were being moved into the back of the building in 2 weeks. I suppose I'll never meet you again. If you can still understand me at all, read this letter carefully. 1 week from now, I'll come to see you. Sit at the rightmost seat in the visiting room. I'll have a knife put under the table. Take it with you in secret. There will be 2 there, but only take 1. Arkin will bring the other one to you if you fail. Arkin has told me he'll definitely get this letter to you. Once you've read this, hide it, and don't show anyone. Because if anyone finds it, it will mean trouble for Arkin. Your loving mother." Well, that was fucking dark. Backtracking, we can find the visiting room open where we can see a shadowy figure in the window. After it's passed, we can see something under the table on the other side. So we go to the other side where Will gets a bad feeling. Using our other key from before, we can open this next door and grab the knife. Leaving through the door for just a second, we can see a shadow leap down at Will, as he must have felt a presence behind him. Going back up, we can find a newspaper on the first floor where we were previously, but it tells a story about a man named Alec who had killed himself with a knife in this very mental hospital. Will wonders if that had always been there, still getting a pit feeling in his stomach about it. On the 4th floor, Will hears something as we head up farther to find a new hall, with some other rooms and maps on the bulletin. The map outlines all of the room numbers and specifically crosses off 1411. Going down, I actually found a different room that had blood writing on a desk saying, "The monster's driving me out of here," followed by multiple lines of, "I don't want to leave." Going down to the 4th floor, we can see Pop run into room 1411 that is walled off with concrete. The room next to it, luckily, has a little entrance we can make our way through to see some light. Going in, we can find the blonde man from before who speaks to us softly with a stutter about noticing us before. He has Pop in his lap and says that it's weird to have a rat friend, but also questions if it can talk, right? Will says Pop can talk, and then the man asks if it can say hi to Ed. This is where we learn the man's name is Edward, or Ed for short. He doesn't live here, but he can't exactly go back home because he has some business to attend to here. Pop then startles Ed and runs off. Ed apologizes for making him run, but also apologizes he can't help since he's also searching for something. A small black notebook. Will promises to bring the notebook to Ed if he finds it, and if Ed wouldn't mind keeping an eye out for Pop too. Going upstairs, all the exam rooms are closed, but trying to leave leads to one of the doors opening. Entering, we can hear more wails and see a shadow in the adjacent room. Going forward, Will finds a document storage room and looks into the mirror to see a face, with red and crying eyes looking into his, while he fades. This is why I hate the dark, because there's always something there. This is when we get a scene of a younger Will and his mom before bedtime. She shuts off the lights, and we can see a dark figure sitting in the chair in his room. We can see clearer that it's a mime. When it's night and the room goes dark, he always appears. He never says a word. He's just there. He must be a mime. I try to call for Mom, but it's pointless. He disappears once the lights come on. Just who is he? Does he want to tell me something? Is he my friend, or is he... The dream ends, and we can find we're sleeping on the floor under Keith's jacket. Keith asks if he found his rat and tells him to head home, calling him William Morton, his full legal name. Keith explains that he found this off of his student ID. He then asks how he knows David, but Will reveals that he's his cousin. Then Keith wonders if he's being threatened, mentioning the demon child letter from before. Keith, being a good friend of David after the events of the Boogeyman, asks what Will's story is for being out so far. Will becomes very defensive and demanding, telling Keith to come with him because he's scared. Keith wonders why he's not so confident like he was earlier, and Will explains Pop is what kept him confident and safe. Then he starts to tear up because he should have listened to Pop about not coming here. Will says it's so cold and lonely and dark, but he's not worrying about Pop. He's worried about himself getting lost. Keith starts to empathize with him and asks if Pop has any unique features. So if he finds him among the plethora of rats, he'll probably be able to recognize him. Will says he has a bent right leg with some fur missing. He just demands Will not stay past nightfall, but he can't stick with him because he's still investigating. He then refuses to elaborate on his case with Will, as we can go into his clutch bag and find a picture saying, "All those years you suffered, those were the best years of your life. George Schmid." After that, Will starts poking for more information. It was a mental hospital turned homeless shelter. Keith then dismisses his claims about shadows and then dismisses that the new door in the room is not unlocked. Going in the room, we can snatch a key and see it's for the document room. Going to that room from before, we can hear Pop and see him in a bookshelf. There's also what looks like a screaming rat graffitied on the wall, and we can find some tarot cards. After moving the ladder to grab him, he gets scared and we can find a newspaper about an incident known as the Happy Murders. The article gives us a detailed account about the history of the building and the incident Keith alluded to. The details were all different in cause, from stabbing to strangulation. The only commonality being they were hung upside down from a rope. 5 of the residents confessed to the murders and gave different reasons, but mentioning nothing of the rope they now hung from. The most interesting thing in the eyes of the columnist is how the oldest death was 3 weeks prior, with the freshest being 3 days. Yet no one said a thing about the bodies, even with how openly they were displayed. The reason they were called the Happy Murders, though, was because all of them stated after their confession, "Now I've finally become happy." After that, the graffiti gets a dark shadow on it, and Will gets a bit sad, wondering if Pop hates him now. Leaving the room, the left door in the hall suddenly opens. Finding a map, we can see we're in Building 2. Now that we're in the second building, we can find a pot that has a headless doll and string for some fucking reason, but we can grab it this time too. Then Will realizes it's hair, when suddenly a dark figure appears from behind him. Ah! It's a woman! Will recognizes her from the cafe and she says she knows he's David's cousin, after asking him. She urges him to go home to David and drags us outside while Will protests. He explains he needs to find his friend, so Sophie's willing to help and leave quickly. After joining us, we can go back to Building 2 and see the doll is gone, and a previously locked gate is now open. We can find a doll and notice about a doctor named Dennis Sinaire, who has taken some vacation time. Going to the next hall, we can find Keith again in the storage room. Upstairs is a nursery room that has the book of the boy who cried wolf. It's the same story as usual, but for those who don't know, the story is of a boy who plays a prank on his village by saying a wolf are attacking the sheep. The village believes him, so they check to see, and they were duped. The child does it again, and the villagers get angry. So on the third time, when a wolf really was attacking the sheep, they do nothing, and the sheep end up dying. The next room over gives an addendum in picture form, with childish drawings showing a boy finding wolves that plan to attack the villagers. The boy says nothing, and the villagers get eaten and die. But the boy sees it as revenge for not being believed. There's also an interview on paper to the side. Sam says, "Lisa, could you tell us about your pictures? Is it the boy who cried wolf?" Lisa, "Yes, that's right." It seems to have a different ending. Did you come up with that? "Yes, that's right." Why did the boy let the villagers die? Because they didn't believe him. The boy was the one who lied. Isn't he the one who did something wrong? Grown-ups lie all the time too. And all the villagers died? No. 4 of them are still on the run. What are they doing now? I don't know. But a wolf better eat them soon. Why should they get eaten? Once all the bad grown-ups are gone, we can go anywhere. I think it's pretty interesting that they specifically mention 4, possibly looking back at the rest of the victims of the Happy murders. Maybe possibly referencing the first person who was murdered and the 4 after being the 4 who have ran away. We can also find a room with a doll hidden under the bed after a shadow disappears from the room. In one of the bathroom stalls further up is a doll from the flower pot, scaring Will. Sophie says it could be different, but Will shouts it isn't the same in his defense. We can find a staff member's diary in a ward, and it says, "That Andy really creeps me out. He's always gathering people around the visiting area for some weird divination. They're convinced they have to follow their fortunes. Sometimes they won't eat, or won't take baths, or they burn their own hands." The patient in 2103 is finally getting sent to Building 3. Thank goodness. That girl drove the doctor up the wall and sent him on vacation. And making a psychiatrist neurotic is no joke. Just watching her wander around makes me feel like I might lose it too. Andy's not listening to me anymore. Says he's got a bad fortune, so he won't leave the room. He's just been clinging onto the table. We'll have to hope he dies that way. Lost the key to the library. Well, there's a spare, so I can probably leave it. Besides, I don't want to get yelled at. There's also a doll that can be found in the drain with a crowbar that you can ask Keith to grab prior, in the document room. After finding all the dolls, we can cut them open using the knife from before. We can also find another doll in an examination room. To be frankly honest, sometimes the shadows that allude to the dolls would come at a time when I already checked those rooms, so I'm not sure what order you're supposed to trigger them. After that, I had clicked the cards by accident and found out that Sophie knows what all the tarot cards mean, giving both definitions for each card, which will be important later. And when I say both definitions, tarot cards can be read right side up and upside down. Right side up is just however they look with their title, and that is their initial meaning. But if it's given in a flipped orientation, they often have different meanings or an opposite meaning. After her explaining them, Will shows her the Hanged Man card, and she says there's a bunch of interpretations for it. Like how it looks like he's suffering when the card is upright. Standing upside down, it's more like precarious dancing. Sophie puts words to it like turnabout, trials, self-sacrifice, and maybe a sudden reversal of fortune awaits. Now we can head through the gate that blocked us, having Sophie open it. Inside the next room is a room full of tables, and multiple shadows appeared, surrounding a tarot card mat. Sophie tells us not to scare her, but she's trying to convince herself there was nothing. But then they get scared and run to Keith, which shows this amazing image. I honestly love this artwork so much because it's just them incoherently babbling with Keith's bloodshot and bagged eyes. He makes fun of her, and so they go back down to the room so they prove they can handle it. In there we can find a new map of Building 2 showing all the rooms with 2308 and 2208 crossed off. The two of them can't go through the left hall because of an ominous feeling from a shadow. Using Sophie's explanations of the cards and the journal that quoted words from before, we're supposed to guess which cards should go where. Its past was tyranny, present is unease, and what awaits them, being ruin, and in the future they need, is salvation. The cards are a reverse emperor, the moon, and then judgment. This lets us pass onto the next hall. Ahead there is a room with a black aura beneath the door, where we can find the headless doll from before in the bathtub. Sophie tries to rationalize it, but Will gets defensive again about believing it. But she confesses she just wants to hope that it's nothing. We can see some parallels between this dynamic and that of the boy who cried wolf, with the village boy and wolves from before. Speaking of which, after cutting open all the dolls, we can go back to the picture from before, where we can find an addition. When the villagers were all gone, the boy realized something. He realized he was alone. As much as I tried to lie for attention, I'm still alone as ever now. No one would ever look at me. The boy cried in the middle of the empty village. He cried, and the tears fell and fell. As sadistic as the picture seemed before, it reveals some sort of chilling loneliness after revenge. The pride of winning went past the moral judgment, and he ended up alone. If you've seen my past videos, you'll know the developer loves stories and symbolism to give us the pieces to our characters' problems. But back to the halls, one room has Will scared, leading him to grabbing a wooden box. Next to it, a note. The box looks like a dice pattern when the note has various patterns and drawings that look like they will be helpful later. Going up, 2208 is closed with an iron plate, but it has a broken looking wall that we can shimmy through. And the stairs are full of rubble, so we can't go up that way. In room 2208, we can find some debris indicating a hole in the ceiling. What we can do is move the table and chair so that we can use it as a ladder to room 2308. We can use this room to exit to the hall bypassing the broken stairs. A few rooms away, there's a door where we can find a security box. A few rooms away, there's a door open where we can find a security box and a pinup poster. Yup, it's exactly what it looks like. Funny enough, you have to look at it multiple times for Sophie to just call you a pervert, and then be able to look underneath the poster to find a code. Inputting this code into the security box, we can find a black notebook, the one Ed wanted. But Will is too kind-hearted to find out what's inside. Going upstairs, we can hear Pop and find him in the dining room. Will and Pop reunite once more, him saying he's hopeless without Pop. Sophie comes in after and gets introduced to Pop, but screams because, it's a rat. She's shaking while he tries to bring Pop closer as she screams and swipes Will away. This scares Pop again, and Will gets angry, because he leaves. Sophie tries to apologize once again, and she realizes what she's done. But Will screams at her to go, and say that he won't go with her to leave. As she leaves, we can see a puppet hanging onto Sophie's back, which Will notices. Murdoch? We get another flashback to Will in school where the teacher asks why he hit another student named Mitch with a ball. But Will says he's innocent, claiming Captain Murdoch did it. The teacher doesn't believe him, with Will saying Captain Murdoch fled when she came and takes away his recess saying, "No one likes a liar." We flash a bit forward to recess time when Will is alone in the class, where he blames Murdoch. The captain appears and says he was doing Will a favor. Mitch wouldn't have been his friend because he treats him like a dummy, and is always smirking around him. Murdoch tries to justify his point by saying that to be a good friend with someone, you have to have a real understanding. But none of these people understand him. None of them know anything about Will, and none of them would ever try. But in his explanations, he creates a paradox, saying that Will is better off alone without trying to make people his friends. So Will asks if they're his friends, and Murdoch says how of course they are, and how Will has lots of friends. Nothing lonely about him. We come back to the present, where Will wonders why Murdoch was hanging on to her, and remembering how he always played pranks and stopped people from getting close to him. Will realizes how terrible he was and realizes that he's just like Murdoch, being cruel and pushing her away out of the fear she would reject him. And it's kind of ironic to say that someone doesn't understand you, because to have an understanding, you have to get to know that person. How are you supposed to get to know that person when they don't have an understanding of you? It's an interesting paradox. Going into the adjacent room, which is a kitchen, Will gets a bad feeling when walking by the table. Going into the storage room, I found Ed, where he says he got here because he knows a bunch of the secret routes from when he lived here. Giving him the black notebook, he's quite happy, and we learn more about him. This book is from someone he used to know, from when he lived here in the homeless shelter. His father was a drunk and couldn't hold a job, but his mother was dead, so they would stay here. He noticed us being down, and Will explains about losing Pop again, and how mean he was to Sophie, especially after being such an asshole. Ed gets upset, because Will said a bad word, and says he shouldn't say them to other people or about himself. He's sure Sophie will accept his apology, since Will's a good kid. Ed says he needs to go look for some more stuff, but before he does, Will asks if he remembers the Happy murders. Ed recalls that a lot of police came and wouldn't allow them to live there anymore. Before he leaves, he says that it was only natural, since everyone was so unhappy. Which is odd, because prior he said that they were happy when they were there. When he leaves, we can look to the elevator door on the right that is closed by boards, but we can unscrew them. Going in the elevator shaft, we can find a ladder and we can scurry down it to find the elevator. Going all the way down, we can end up in a new hallway. In an elevator shaft farther right, we can actually find a key in the elevator floor. On the left, we can find a water storage room and even find another baby in hair on top of one of the tanks. Will takes it, but thinks he's going nuts. And then he reflects on if he told Keith or Sophie they would ever believe him. No one ever believed him about Mime, Murdoch, or Pop. No one except Ed, and Will trails his thoughts into how creepy this place is, and back to focusing on Pop. Trying to leave the room, Will notices something is on at the handle. More hair. This startles him into running back into the pool, almost drowning. Luckily, Keith jumps in and saves us, and tells us how next time we should find a cleaner pool. Now we're in the control room where Keith started a fire so that we could dry off, and he says that the fact he's still here must mean that he hasn't found Pop, and probably wouldn't listen to him about leaving. Will then starts to talk down about himself again, saying Pop must be disgusted by how pathetic he is. Yet, he's still hopeless without Pop. Keith tries to empathize with him by telling him about his pet hamster Frosty. How one day he let him into the garden to play, but then found him in the mouth of the neighbor's cat. Frosty never came home, and he regretted how it ended, and believed it shouldn't have. So, he tells Will to keep searching until he's satisfied. He'll keep quiet to the school and other authorities. Before we leave, Keith asks if we had seen his ring, a gold one that goes on top of another ring he has. He suspects it must have gotten lost in the water tank, and Will takes note of it. Before leaving the room, we can refer back to the note with drawings on it and use it to grab a torn label from one of the lockers. The label says, The and 6-1. Looks like we're missing a little bit of it for right now. But back to the water room, how do we grab the ring? Well, going outside we can find a drain, but in the kitchen from before we can find a sieve and put it on that drain. In the tank room, we can twist the valve and have the water go through the pipes and find Keith's gold ring in the sieve. Will gives him the ring and strikes up a conversation about why it's so misshapen. Keith replies that it was because his son and him made it and it came out wonky, so he keeps it as a good luck charm after he died. He would have been 10 if he were still alive. Will feels bad and tries to empathize by saying how he gets it because his dad died of heart failure. Keith assures them that he's learned to deal with his grief like we had to do in the previous game. But now we can go back on mission. Back on the floor with the kitchen, we can go upstairs and find a library. Inside, we can look through the dark room, but getting deep inside, we start to hear footsteps. These aren't Keith's or Sophie's, though. They're someone different. So we have a mission to hide from the stranger who comes in as a shadow, trying to coax us out. If the man catches us, he gets confused and questions who we are, even though he had seemed to know someone was in the room. but didn't expect it to be some kid. Keith comes in and suddenly reveals that Robert was supposed to be back at the motel, but the other officer fell asleep. Keith seems to insinuate Robert is here for something else, and makes Will leave. At this point, to progress, we can climb over these sandbags that lead to the basement and go down. One room has a bunch of lockers that match the drawing we got from earlier. Opening one of them, we get another label that says Dice 42, which is then added onto our previous label. In the room, we can find a picture of Joseph Blanc's The Murder of Laius by Oedipus from 1867. The story behind this painting regards a prophecy to Laius, the king of Thebes, that one day his son will murder him. To avoid this prophecy, he has his son, Oedipus, sent away to die, but a shepherd saves him and raises him. One day, Oedipus and Laius have an argument on a crossroads about right of way, where Oedipus kills Laius. I guess road rage was even normal back then. Now, the greater prophecy has to do with Oedipus then marrying his mother and becoming king of Thebes, but that's neither here nor there when we look at how this painting relates to our story. After seeing it, Robert enters and apologizes for scaring us. He lights the lamp and asks why Will is here. He tells him that his friend and him were snowed in, and then Robert asks about his relationship to the detective. Robert tells about how he is involved in a murder case, and the detective keeps questioning him. Will asks why he would be asked questions and if he knew the victim. But Robert pleads ignorance with the line that the police just ask questions, they don't tell you a thing. Will asks why he's here, and Robert explains he was here when it was a shelter, and he's just reminiscing. Will highly doubts it, and Robert starts to leave. That is until Will says that he should probably tell Ed to head out too with all the snow. Robert's demeanor changes and grabs Will by the collar, starting to interrogate him. Suddenly, a rat comes in from a crack in the wall and scares Robert. It surrounds and runs around him by his feet, and he stomps it, squishing the rat into a bloody pulp. Will is stunned, and then snaps, screaming at Robert, trying to beat him up for killing his friend. Suddenly, Keith enters and pulls Will off Robert, telling him to get the hell out. Keith tries to calm down Will. Keith tries to calm down Will and make him breathe slowly, but Will starts to break down in tears over Robert squishing Pop, and he starts to blame himself. That because he brought Pop along, he got him killed. He starts to break down in tears over Robert squishing Pop, and he starts to blame himself, that because he brought Pop along, he got him killed. Keith then questions if it's really Pop. Keith goes over to inspect the corpse and says how Pop had a crooked leg and some fur missing. This one's leg wasn't crooked and had a pattern on its back. How he knows the rat's leg wasn't crooked before it became a pancake is beyond me, but Will is relieved it's not Pop, still confused that it attacked Robert. Will then asks Keith if Robert is a murderer. Frustrated, Robert ran his mouth and doesn't listen. Keith elaborates that no, he's actually a victim, but doesn't explain further. He then says to find his rat and go to David's as he leaves. Before exiting, he puts a white towel over the body so that Will doesn't get too unsettled, and we're back to controlling Will. Leaving the room, we can go across the hall and find an office with on a table there's some rope that unsettles Will and a garbage can full of letters. Dearest Doctor, how do you do? I've placed a present on your desk. Isn't it just adorable? I'd be happy if you treated it well. Alice Stanley. Dearest Doctor, how do you do? It seems you forgot your gift, so I put it back on your desk. Please think of me and take it with you. Alice Stanley. Dearest Doctor, you forgot your gift and left it there again. Please don't lose it again this time. Alice Stanley. Dearest Doctor, so you hate the sight of my face? I heard you talking to Dr. Woods. Well, this should do now, shouldn't it? This time, do not lose it and take care of it. Why do you so quickly throw it away? I even took away that ugly face. How about this time? I'm quite proud of my hair. Alice. Don't abandon me. Stay with me. Well, what fits that description? A present that seems to have had a face taken away because it was ugly, and then covered in hair. Oh yeah! So now that we figured out it's the headless doll, we just have to figure out on whose desk it wants to be on. Well, there was that doctor who needed a vacation because of all the stress he was under with a patient. So, let's put it on his desk. Mr. Dennis Schneider. Leaving the room, we can see a shadow pass by and go upstairs. Upstairs, we can see the shadow continue to walk down the hall. After this, we can now find the door in front of the lobby upstairs opened. This gives us a connecting bridge to walk on to get to our next building. Outside, the snow rages as Will has to cover his face, and we hear a woman crying. Looking ahead, this isn't the bright-haired Sophie, but a dark-haired woman Will recognizes. Misery. We quickly flash back to Will at a playground asking why she's always crying as we see her on the sidewalk. He tries to comfort her by staying with her and talking, but she doesn't respond. He says how he's all alone too because everyone thinks he's weird, but he'll give her a name, Misery. Will says it's important to have a name because it says you're actually there. Misery does love company, as they say. Flashing back to the present, Will tries to reason that she couldn't possibly be there, and he notes that all of them that he sees had left when he met Pop. But now that he's gone, they keep appearing. Going inside, we can find a building map to this third building. In the staff room are some towels that we can't pick up right now. In the kitchen, there's a doodle on the floor that looks like a weird square, puddle, and line. On a table nearby is a notebook. I scolded the patient in 3202 for drawing on the floors. He keeps wandering with a map of his hometown. He was just depressing, so I confiscated it. But he's still wandering around here. The patient in 3408 is clamoring about being watched. I taped up the cell to serve as makeshift blinds, but he still says he's being watched. He sits in a chair by his bed up against the bars, looking into the hall through the tape. He keeps muttering, "Everyone is watching me." Talk about disturbing. Leaving the kitchen across the hall is a lounge room with another odd doodle that looks like a cradle in a balloon. Back in the staff room, though, we can find a map of Sunnyside, the same one from patient 3202. It has writing saying, "If people have such things as hometowns, this city must be my heart's eternal hometown. Hearing children laugh on the grass in Oak Park, I get a meal in Sunnyside Village, and then I cross Balin's Park so I can watch the ships leave Sunnyside Bay. But those happy days are never to return. If only someone could take me back there." Near cell 3408, with the taped wall, we can find a notice that says, "We encourage everyone to lead a quiet life. Do not talk loudly. This is not a lounge. Watch your step in the halls, and don't make too much noise. If you find someone hurting himself or hurting others, inform the staff at once. Keep your hands and feet to yourself." We're unable to go past the taped up cell, so we have to find something else. First, what we can do is follow the doodles on the ground from the man's cell to all the spots he used to visit. We can follow the order by looking at the map and seeing which areas line up with which doodle. Each one leads to him standing over the doodle and then following us until the last doodle in the lounge. Once he sees it, our flashlight starts to short out, and the shadow of a dog starts to crawl around the room, saying how we're lost. The shadow says that we should have believed them, and to go find Pop, since Will still can't do anything by himself. Seeing the dog leave the room, Will recognizes it with the name Billy? We flash back to hear David's mom saying that her visit has to do with how Will is seeing things again, probably due to his father's death. The counselor replies saying how Will saw these friends prior to his father's death, so there must not really be a connection, and they are simply figments of his imagination. Suddenly, a dog named Old Billy comes and asks why he's so down. Will explains it's because all the people in this hospital question him and act like they're mad at him because he's wrong. Will asks if Billy would just talk to the others so they believe him, but Billy reminds him no one would believe a talking dog. As proof of being a good friend, though, Old Billy says that he's being mistreated and not fed enough. He gives him an extra piece of information. The doctor's been bringing a woman to the examination room. It isn't his wife, and there's always a strong smell of perfume within after. What the fuck? Old Billy adds on that animals don't lie, unlike humans. Then he tells him to go try telling the doctor what he just told him to test if it's true. Going into the counselor's office, he asks about Will's friends. Will says that he doesn't want to speak to him since he's a bad man, and tells him he shouldn't mistreat Old Billy. The man then says he would never do that, and that he fed him. Wait, when did he last feed him? Will adds on the part about the woman, and he tries to calm Will down to avoid the subject. All of a sudden, Will bites him, and the man screams that he's a little demon. Now we fast forward outside to Will's mom dragging him away as we see old Billy. The final words saying that they don't lie, and someday one will appear who understands him very well. Follow him. There we again hear that line about someone understanding him, and that one will appear who understands him very well. Not one will appear who will learn to understand him, but already does. Will thinks about it more and wonders if he meant Pop, and how could he still be alive? He was old even way back then. In the end, he comes to the same conclusion that it's hopeless without Pop around. Going all the way back up, we can get into the taped room and bring over the chair to the wall to see through the tape. The words we see through it are, "Everyone watching you." We can tear the notice off the wall, which allows us to move forward into the next hallway. This leads us to the next bridgeway, where Will looks through the bars into the woods. He starts to realize the hospital was built so deep inside to hide all the weirdos. I mean, who would want to see them? They all had their own little worlds they wanted to be in, so all you could really do is remove them from the greater world. Will then starts to reflect and see himself in that same way. Locked inside his own world where everyone outside thinks he's crazy. He wonders what will happen to him when he suddenly sees Keith come by and light a cigarette. He asks if Will really thinks Pop can talk, and Will thinks he's being mocked again. It's how things have always been. You say you can hear animals talk, yet no one believes them. Will mentions old Billy, and Keith starts to ask more onto it. What started them talking to him? When Will thinks back to what started it, he says it was the Hanged Man. Will continues to try and avoid talking about it, but then Keith starts to say when he was younger, he only judged the world by what was visible. Looks, athleticism, intelligence. But imagination gets trimmed so soon in life. Will's imagination hadn't, and Keith says how, of course he won't believe Will. But that doesn't mean he's not interested in it. Will continues on how his oddness makes others think that his mother mistreats him, and he doesn't want to cause so much trouble for her. Keith tries to explain how parents are stepping stones for their children. If he can make her smile someday, that'll be enough. But he urges him to quit for the night, since David will be worried. Will gets upset again, saying David could never be worried about someone like him. Keith wonders why, and Will explains how he's not David's cousin, but his brother. It's only their father that's the same. He heard it from his mother when they were on the phone. We flash back to Will reading in his room, waiting for his mom to make dinner. We can hear her talking to a Mr. Hoover, David's last name. She asks for him to please leave the issue because she never knew and only found out about him later, and how she feels terrible about what happened to his mother. She then asks him to say nothing about this to Will, and how she doesn't want him to get disillusioned by his father. Seeing Will, she suddenly hangs up and makes dinner. He's never seen his mom cry before. And Hoover? Didn't he meet him at his father's funeral? Going upstairs, Will finds his father's diary, and we come back to the present. Will tells Keith that the diary explained how his father cheated on his wife with Will's mom, getting her pregnant and secretly divorcing David's mom. His mom never even knew that there had been another family. Only at his death did they learn. The father had photos of David, his previous wife, and how he regrets leaving his family. There were quotes saying, "Whenever I meet him, David won't even look at me." Or, "I doubt I'll ever be forgiven for abandoning my frail wife and my middle school-aged son." The diary had a letter, the same one with the demon child remark and the Hanged Man card. His dad must have hidden it, but he still knows that it's because of him that David's family was ruined. He doesn't think it's David who's threatening her, but he knows he'd never be able to protect his mother. Pop had warned him that there's no point in going, and what good would it even do? But he went regardless, using an address that his mom had for David. Keith wondered why he called himself David's cousin in the first place, but he just said that because that's how David excused him from causing problems at the fishing shop. He had done that since he saw a fishing rod like his dad used to use when they went out to go fishing, and he got mad. Will came to apologize for messing up the family, but ended up causing even more trouble and ran away. He questions why he's a coward and doesn't know what to do. Keith then tells him that that letter wasn't from David. His handwriting doesn't match, and he doesn't threaten people because he's too good-hearted. He also points out Will never heard the call and was jumping to conclusions. Yet when he came to town, David could have ignored who he was. But he still took in Will and wanted to talk. Keith says he's not a coward, but would be if he gives up now. So he should go back and apologize to David and that fishing store owner. Keith says he'll leave in a little bit, so tells him that he should hurry up as well. Will asks him if his son is still important to him, so Keith responds that he always will be. And while he won't say whether his father's decision was right or wrong, it still hurt people. And putting yourself through pain might seem irrational to you, but it's the way a lot of things are. If you bite at everyone, it's hard to live. After leaving, Will realizes he needs to focus on his mission, since he doesn't have time for crying. Entering the fourth and last building, some rubble falls, scaring him, and we can grab a map to find a note that staff must wear a name tag. Going downstairs, we can find that there are rooms for people who have much stronger issues, as they are padded cells. Walking by one of the cells, Will feels a hand grasp out to him and gets scared, refusing to go further. Going back to the staff room, we can find name tags from different staff. Across the hall is a shower room where we can find a red stain that looks like a creepy person. Upstairs, there's an artwork of the month from room 4305 by Kenny Jenkins that says, "I love to shake hands with good people," showing someone smiling with a name tag and another person in the cell with what looks like fire? To solve the puzzle, we need to have gone to the dining room in building 2 and find the last torn label underneath one of the tables as indicated by the previous note. And just saying, if you go back to watch these streams for the last Hanged Man stream, just fast forward 50 minutes in. No reason. Getting the label gives us the full message of roll the dice, 35, 61, 42. Putting this code into the wooden box puzzle we got prior gives us Sergio Bowser's name tag, the one person Kenny doesn't like to shake hands with. The letter alongside it reads, "Dustin, since I am quitting my job here, I'm writing you this letter because I was hated in building 4. A patient named Kenny hated me especially. He always sought handshakes from everyone, yet when I passed through, he always drew back. Thank you for always being friendly with me. It's against the rule to give gifts, so I'll give you the name tag I always wore. I hope you'll remember me. I'd like to meet you on the outside. Take care." Putting on the name tag allows us to pass that door now. Heading down further, we hear weird sounds and can find another creepy, bloody person painting. Ahead, a crack in the floor appears next to an open cell with red writing on the floor. "Demons are coming. From the shower room, from the hallway, and even from this room. This place is hell. The screams of the dead echo here. The demons must be stopped at once." There's another creepy person stain that we can spray paint over on the wall. You can also spray paint over the other figures we saw from before. I'm gonna be honest, I don't actually know if it's a puzzle or just an achievement, because I just felt like doing it. I didn't really get stopped. The next floor down has a locked iron gate and another padded room with the door open. Rubble then falls from the ceiling, scaring Will to getting stuck in the open cell. But the cell won't open, so Will tries to scream for help. But no one is coming for him. Suddenly, the hangman card falls into his pocket, and he starts to remember the catalyst for seeing all of these things. We flash back to Will playing outside with a ball when suddenly he comes across a man hanging from a tree. He asks what he's doing, and the man asks if he looks like he's playing. Will's mom always said that climbing trees is dangerous, but he argues that he's not climbing, he's hanging. Will doesn't understand why, and he explains that he was hanged by all the things in this world. It started with a minor sense of wrongness in myself, in others, in society, in the world. A deceit of things that should just naturally be. Mere nagging feelings that seemed to corner me. Without even noticing, they got bigger, made me suffer, until they became a rope around my neck. Beware, Will. Never overlook even the most trivial feelings and sensations. Never shut your eyes to the other oddities you sense. Everything you feel, that is your ally. And the very world itself, never doubt it. If you do, it'll become your enemy. I'm sure the things that cornered me will someday stand behind you too. Little Will doesn't quite understand, but asks if he could come visit again to hear more. The man says he'll be waiting, and then we flash a little forward to him going to play outside, where his mom warns there will probably be police out there. When we go down, we can now see police tape and flowers. After meeting the hanged man, Will started seeing all of those things, even Pop. He knows a talking rat couldn't exist, just didn't want to acknowledge it. He's just scared of losing such a knowledgeable friend, even if he might not be real. Are the things he sees real or not? He just doesn't know. No one can see his friends, but the hanged man was definitely real. Or was he? No one understands him. Mom was worried. Dad listened, but he was a traitor like the counselor. Looking back on the hanged man's words, they start to make sense as a revelation. As you grow up, you start to see things you didn't before, turning distrustful of things that only bothered you as a kid. What's a lie? What's a truth? The path seems so twisted. Will he meet the same fate as the hanged man? He just needs someone to lead him forward and tell him the path. A path that's straight, like everyone else's. Will starts to cry, but then realizes there's no point. So he's got to do something on his own. The only thing he can really analyze is the door. Looking at the handle, the bolt isn't catching. So if he just uses something L-shaped, he could escape. We can take our hanged man card and fold it into an L to get it to work and escape. After realizing what he has just been able to do on his own, he realizes that he shouldn't just freak out, and that he really is capable. The gate's still locked, so we just have to head back up. Going upstairs, Will hears something and we can find Robert in the lounge area with the painting taken off the wall. Robert stumbles a bit and says how he actually wanted to apologize for killing Pop. Will tells him that wasn't his rat. And Robert is relieved. But Will asks why he grabbed him before. And Robert tells us it was out of nervousness, and tells him to steer clear of the detective. Robert tries to offer helping to search, but Will declines, because he was lying about coming for nostalgia. He came looking for someone, and exploded at the name of Ed. Will explains his distrust of Robert, and he starts to break down about his previous shithole life, and blames his father while shaking. Keith comes in and tells him to come over, while Robert is acting weird. Suddenly, Robert grabs us as a shield, and Keith throws down his gun. Robert tries to make Keith tell him the truth, that they suspect him. But he didn't kill his father. He may have wanted to, but never did. He's just been doing honest work and doesn't want to be chased around. And Keith clears up that he's not the suspect, but a potential victim. Suddenly, Keith says that they think the killer sees no difference between the father who killed him and the brother who abandoned him. Robert becomes defensive, saying he sent money and didn't abandon him. Keith convinces him to let go of us and tells him to stop driving himself into a corner. Robert makes a final plea that they let Ed go. He's not the killing type. He likes animals, has a terrible stutter due to being beaten. It was his father's fault, not Ed's. Keith responds how if they don't catch him now, he'll just be running forever. What type of happiness is that? Robert finally lets us go and leaves, asking for some time alone. Will starts to question to himself how Ed could kill someone. He seemed so nice. But maybe he should tell Keith in case he doesn't know. But looking at where the painting was, there's now a hole where something must have been hidden. What was back there? Running downstairs, we can find Keith and tell him we've seen Ed, warning him that he's been there a while. Keith can't call backup ever since his phone got busted from the water tank. Keith allows us to run out so long as we go straight to David's to allow him to catch Ed. Going up, we can find Pop, who runs into the shower room where we can find Keith's pistol as he runs out again. Pop runs into the trash chute, and we fall in, trying to save him. Searching around, we can find our flashlight and hear voices from the other side of the door. Robert and Ed are having an argument about him moving around. Robert warns Ed and says that he has a safe place for him to stay, but Ed still has something to do. Robert tells him not to follow that stupid bastard's notebook, and Ed says that he'll turn himself over to the police, but Rob won't let him. Even through Ed's pleas about wanting to stop the chase and allegations against Robert, Robert continues to curse, causing Ed's head to hurt, leading him to snap, beating Robert to a bloody pulp. Will watches in tremendous horror until Ed recognizes what he's just done. He's done it again, and starts to cry and apologize to his brother. He starts to murmur that now it won't be enough, and he needs to go looking for something and find Will too. Will realizes that he needs to get out quickly and heads out and down the hall. Ed sees him and asks if he saw his rat. Will asks if Ed killed his father, and he admits to it, saying that he doesn't know why. That day he had gotten fired from the Chinese place he'd worked at, and his dad was mad about it, hitting him and saying, "Why do you make me suffer? Because of you I'm unhappy." It shocked him because he thought him working made his dad happy. And before he knew it, there was blood everywhere. He didn't know what to do and just disappeared. Rob had found him and tried to bring things to him for help. Yet he still killed Robert too. Ed decided that he won't run anymore. What he's done is unforgivable. But he'll only go once he's done something important. The thing Mr. George had taught him. The priests had always said that they were punished for their deeds that had led them there, and that they would need to repent by doing work for society. It was Mr. George who had told them how to. He said that the years they suffered were the best of their lives, yet those years would never be happy, because happiness requires sacrifice of sinful people. He justifies this, how their sacrifice made others happy. Will then realizes that he's talking about the happy murders. Rob didn't understand how it made them happy, since he was able to crawl out through just hard work alone. It's not about good and evil in law or society, but a trial to escape from your suffering. It's not the result, but the process. It's only their philosophy. No one else needs to understand it. He says he was reminded of these rituals when he saw us confessing, and we finally learned what Will had said in the confession booth. "I am a demon child. Because of me, a family fell apart." Ed is happy to have met him, and starts tying a rope into a noose, while saying, "I want to be happy too." Will screams and runs away as Ed calmly walks back. Will starts to panic and run away. He can find Keith on one of the elevated bridges, where he tells him that Rob is dead, and he might be next. Keith ushers us towards the exit when suddenly rocks fall on the back of Keith's head. His head is bloody, and Will remembers the towels from the staff room downstairs. When he finally gets back, we see Ed standing over Keith's body, calling him a bad person who killed lots of people. He's glad to know that because Will alone wouldn't have been good enough to absolve of the sin of killing Rob as well. Ed tries to make Will comply by saying he'll snap Keith's neck if he won't. Then we see us being tied up in the basement, while Ed places us in a chair, getting ready to hang us and cut us open. Ed tries to calm us down, to endure the pain, and thanks us. That's when Keith gets up and pushes Ed, untying us. He gets angry at Keith because he's doing things out of order, and demands Will gets back in the chair, since he knows the building well and will catch up. Keith grabs his ankle and yells at us to run. We do so and hide in one of the padded cells. Quickly sneaking down to the basement, we see Keith hanging, cut open by Ed's hands. Will throws up and cries at the sight, and realizes he's close to the same fate. Then the screen goes a green hue as we hear the hangman's voice say that was always going to happen to him. It was just a matter of sooner or later, and that this was his future, cornered by the irrational and driven to death. Will screams how he would never be hanged. He's not like him. That's when Will notices Keith's gun. If doing nothing will get me killed, then I'll just have to. Ed re-enters, and Will turns silent as he draws the gun on Ed and fires. Ed screams in pain about his leg as Will fires another shot on his arm. Ed begs him not to shoot as we see him hold Ed to the ground when we hear the final shot go off and the screen goes black. Will starts to become maniacal. After the adrenaline rush, saying it's kill or be killed. If he's ever cornered again, he must fire. Anyone makes him or his mom suffer, he'll never give them a chance. And get rid of them all. That's what I need to do to live. I'll never, never be a hanged man. We fast forward to a red telephone booth, where we hear Will on the line as he apologizes for disappearing, and then he'd like to resume their chat soon. As we pan down to him holding Keith's gun. Bad ending 1. A cornered rat. Yes, that was one of the endings for this game. And it was the bad one that I got on live stream. But before we look at the story, let's give a chance to have some other outcomes. The outcomes are determined by some factors, namely, whether or not you go after Sophie when she screams at Pop and Murdoch follows her, and giving Keith his pistol back after he loses it. Bad ending 1 is when you don't follow Sophie and don't give Keith his gun back. Our next ending has us going after Sophie to apologize. This leads to her saying she'll come back for us later, if we're not at David soon enough. But we don't give Keith his pistol back. When we fall down the garbage chute, we can overhear their conversation. But so does Sophie. They then drag her into the closet where they kill her. Robert is still alive and tells Ed he'll get everything set for him. When we go see Keith to tell him about Ed, he brings us to the spot where the roof hits him, and we see Ed trying to take care of the detective, and stop the bleeding with his coat. Will sees him and threatens him with Keith's gun. Keith tries to tell Will to put it down, but Will still fires. This leads to the gun blowing up in Will's hands, destroying all his fingers and allowing Ed to escape. Keith drags a bloody Will to the highway and begs someone to call an ambulance. We fast forward to a hospital where Will's mom and Keith are together, and he takes full responsibility to what his gun did to Will's fingers. His mother says, however, that Will wanted to speak with him. Will apologizes for what he did and how he was so weak, and made that promise that led to Sophie dying. But Keith assures her that Sophie is actually still alive, just in another hospital for inspection. While Will is glad she's alive, he's upset to have lost the hand that he made the promise with. He'll never be able to hold someone's hand, touch anything, or write anything ever again. Keith then apologizes to Will, and Will screams that he shouldn't be apologizing, that he did nothing wrong. Keith says nothing, and leaves, leading to Will bawling and begging for him to come back. Now we're in Will's room as old Billy says how he told Will to find Pop quickly. Will just can't do anything alone. Now that he's here, he can stay safe, and stay put in his room. When asking where Pop is, Billy says that he passed away. But now he has them. Mime, Murdoch, Misery. Will goes over to the window, but Billy warns him that where the woods are is where the hanged man resides. Will breaks down into tears as we fade away. Bad ending 2, out of the window. Our next ending has us follow Sophie and give Keith his gun. When we get to the portion with Ed and Rob decides to leave because Ed reminded him of his wife and kid and how he doesn't want to make them unhappy. Sophie comes back and we look for Keith and we stumble across Ed. Keith comes to the rescue and Keith tries to make him understand his crime and bring him in. Suddenly, Ed looks to us and apologizes for hiding something. He then shoots Keith with a revolver and Rob comes out to shoot Sophie as well. The two threaten Will to help them hide their bodies in the basement incinerator, and threatens him with the fact that he's now an accomplice. So he can't say anything to anyone. He threatens Will with the fact that it would hurt his family, and Robert would personally hunt him down no matter what. No matter how irrational it sounds, because that is what the world has driven him and his brother to become. Cornered like rats. Will leaves the building and finds a man on the side of the road who calls the sheriff. This leads to Will's mom being called and him staying silent on the ride back. On the train, Mom tries to question him, say that she ran from home young too, just wanting to see a new world. She just hopes that's how it was for him too. He then says that he loves her, and we close in on Will's cold, dead, sleepless eyes, as he monologues on how he has to keep his mouth shut to protect his mom. He saw nothing that night. Nothing in those deep woods. Ending 3. Deep Woods. Our last ending has us avoid Sophie and give Keith his gun. We follow the same events as the first bad ending. While Ed puts us in the chair, Keith gets up, shoots him to make him run away. Keith unties us but crumbles, and Will cries what he should do. Suddenly we hear a familiar voice say how he can't bear to watch it. Pop comes out of a crack in the wall and notes how much of a pickle we're in. Will begs for his help, but Pop refuses, telling him that he'll have to deal with the situations on his own. Will is still defeated, so Pop gives him a hint. Run away! Will is confused and says he needs to save Keith, but Pop explains that Will is a bumbling coward. Running is his strong suit. He just needs to add some courage into it to save Keith. He has to run like both their lives depend on it. Will wonders why he shouldn't just defend himself, and Pop gives him the analogy that any rat can bite back at a cat while cornered. But once you get the taste of blood, you can't go back. Will can't just be stuck in his room staring out the window all day. He was scared of the world outside that window only because that window was the only view he ever saw. Pop tells him to get on his own 2 feet and see the world for what it is. Then he scurries away as Keith comes to it. Pop tells him to get on his own 2 feet and see the world himself. Then he scurries away as Keith turns to him and tells him to hide and run away. Will's dad died when Will was young, but he never wanted him to die like this. So run. Will turns those same words back onto him, saying that his son would never want him to die in a place like this. Will tells Keith to get to safety so that he can lead him away from this place. Leaving, Will is shaking, trying to verbally calm himself down. Suddenly, Ed emerges from the cell behind us, and Will taunts him by swearing about his shitty philosophy. Ed gets angry and runs back in to track him down through the facility. We need to run through rooms and halls, dodging Ed's attempts to capture us as we get out of the building and head into the woods. Dodging through bushes, trees, and tall grass until we reach a small body of water where Ed corners us. Will yells how Keith will be free by now and safe from his torment. Ed falls to his knees as Will talks to him.
Ed, I was always uneasy. I was worried I was delusional and nuts. So the fact that you believed me about Pop and understood what I was saying, it made me happy. But it's no good. If you completely go into your own world, you're ultimately going to be all alone. You can't keep living like that. You won't have faith in yourself. I need to get out of the room I've been in. I need to become an adult. Don't you too? Sacrificing someone won't make you happy. Even if it does, you'll definitely regret it someday. Especially when you're as kind as you are. You need to leave that rundown place and shake off those delusions haunting you. Atone for your crimes, Ed. That's what you need now.
Help me, Will. I don't know what to do anymore. I know there's something wrong with me, but then what should I do? Dad and Rob, they're gone. No one can tell me anymore. Please, listen to what I'm saying. There's no other way.
Even if you become happy that way, it'll still just be you. You'll always be all alone. And someday, you'll end up hanging yourself. I don't want that at all. I'll never be a hanged man!
We hear a gunshot. Keith has arrived with Sophie. Ed tries to flee but gets shot again. Ed starts to cry and Sophie runs up to ensure we're okay. Keith tells us what we did was pretty cool, and then we immediately pass out. We wake up to hear a man and a woman. It's Keith and his wife. She goes to fetch a doctor and Keith tells us about Ed, who confessed to the murder. He also says Robert will be fine and that he's alive, just quite badly injured. He asks if we'll be able to give testimony in the upcoming trial as David comes in. Keith gives the two of us some room to talk. David then smacks Will on the back of the head and disciplines him about running away and being so selfish. Then David pulls up a chair and says to have a talk. This time, no running. It fades to a train platform with Will and his mom, talking about how worried she was. She then goes to get onto the train when Sophie suddenly appears and asks about Pop. Unfortunately, we didn't find him. But she asks about his talk with David. Will says that David wants to get closer, as real brothers, and he wonders why anyone would want a gloomy brother like him. Sophie says that if David said that, it's what he really wants. But maybe Will is the one who doesn't want it. But he assures her that that's not true. It actually made him really happy. But then she gets a bit too close and he blushes, pulling away. I can really relate to this character. Keith walks by to say goodbye, but also has something for him he couldn't bring into the hospital. Pop comes out of his overcoat and rushes to Will. Keith reminds him that David wants him to visit in the spring for baseball, and Sophie wants to see him too. On the way back home, Mom falls asleep, and Will offers Pop some cheese. But he won't talk. Will then remembers that he had once said they'd part ways when Will became a real good man. I think he's a step closer to that goal now. He doesn't need someone to hold his hand now. He's still a coward who doesn't know right from wrong, but he'll meet new people and find new things. But he'll do it himself. Regardless, they'll stay friends. Will isn't a demon child. He's become a man deserving of love and happiness. He always was. And we can see in the final shot a happy and hopeful Will. The good ending. Real good man. So now that we've seen Will's journey through the Hanged Man, let's see what we can take from this. Now I want to quickly look back on the symbolism of the Hanged Man tarot card. My main source is a website called tarotcardguide.com. Only the most trusted of sources. Feeling trapped, confined, self-limiting, uncertainty, lack of direction, needing release, and letting go. Reversed, it means discontentment, apathy, disinterest, stagnation, impulsiveness, negative patterns, and detachment. How much of these things do we see with Will? Will as a character is pretty interesting for this series. In previous entries, we've had David, Sophie, and Keith be our characters that we see go through strife and grow. I'm glad we see them here again, but we can actually track all of their growth to David. In David's game, he's trying to run from his past, and he must confront it. He becomes kinder and grows as a man. Sophie and Keith were both touched by his kindness. For Sophie, it's that she fell in love with him, but became sad that he was already with someone, while for Keith, he helped talk with him about his dead son and his emotions to a level he wouldn't talk with anyone else. In this game, we have the opposite. Will has not been touched by his kindness, but rather malice. And that's an interesting parallel that we can also see in the bad endings of the Sandman and the Boogeyman. For instance, in the Boogeyman, spoiler by the way, there is an ending where you cannot save David, and it becomes a cross he effectively has to bear. Or that you can't save David's wife, in which she becomes incredibly upset. This leads to that issue of Keith having it weighing on his mind. And with Sophie, she's distressed that he already has someone to love, and she feels like that she'll never be able to find someone to love again. This makes it difficult for Will to really trust these people, because in this timeline, they all like David, and see him as a kind man who wouldn't threaten Will's mom. Misunderstandings and this change of perspective we've seen, a flip upon the characters that we've come to love. And Will sees himself as a burden, causing his mother problems and ruining David's family. I think we can agree that being born really isn't his fault, and that his father was the one who caused all these events. Will runs away, and then gets emotional when seeing something that makes him think of his dad. The one who has created a lot of these problems and makes Will lose faith in everything around him. He's someone who has always been called weird, a demon child, created trouble for others because of how he sees the world. Poor Will is in a situation where he sees things, or believes he sees things, that cause problems, and no one really believes him. Whether these friends were real, or whether it was just his mind coming up with excuses or delusions, we can't be entirely sure. Because we know this world has fairies, so why not talking animals? But Will isn't sure either. This is why we have Pop. Will has effectively been abandoned by people, like his friends or teachers, as a weird troublemaker. But Pop is his best friend. Pop tells him what's right and wrong. Pop tries to stop him from doing these things that could harm him or others. Pop is his Jiminy Cricket in a world where he's lost a lot of his support systems. And I'd actually like to tie this to some of the other characters that we've seen. The relationship between Ed and Robert, and the relationship between Alice Stanley and the Doctor. Bear with me for a moment. Alice Stanley has an uncomfortable obsession with the Doctor. Whether it's romantic or platonic, we don't really know. She's not in the best state of mind. But let's go off the fact that it might just be platonic. He's a doctor, he's trying to help her, that's how she sees it. Alice Stanley has become dependent on the Doctor. It's a one-sided relationship where she does not see herself as deserving of anything if he doesn't approve. She needs his validation. We can also see this with Will and Pop. Will needs Pop to validate his decisions, to help him find his way. Not necessarily make the decisions for him all the time, since we clearly see that he's perfectly fine with just disobeying them, but to tell him if it's the right or wrong decision. Whether he'll listen to it is another fact entirely, but that's where he stands. And then we can look at Ed and Robert, them being cornered like rats, at least in one of the endings. The Deep Woods ending specifically. Ed is reliant on both Rob and his father. While we know that Ed's father is not a good man, we know that he leads him to a point where Ed feeds off that validation, or what he thought was validation. Even the idea that working at that Chinese restaurant gave his father even a modicum of pride in his son, or happiness, made him feel validated, and like he belonged. When he learned he didn't, he went haywire. Same with Rob. Rob leads him. Ed doesn't know how to get through the world. Whether this is due to a mental issue or just Ed's perspective on life, we don't really know. But Ed relies on Robert heavily. Robert sends money. Robert helps make decisions. Robert found him and then made him hide in a better spot, gave him supplies, and is trying to organize a way that he can escape. It's an interesting parallel between all these characters that rely on someone in a very one-sided way. Rob can live his entire life without needing Ed, but Ed cannot live another moment without guidance from Rob or his father. Personally, I have my own theories on what makes someone who they are. My 4 pillars are their environment, family, acquaintances, and mentors. His father is dead, for Will. His mother is struggling to handle him, as we saw her break down and be frustrated getting out of the doctor's office. His teachers and classmates ostracize him, seeing him as a boy who cries wolf when they think he's done wrong. Like, throw something at another kid. Not to mention his environment, where his windows show a place where a man was found to be hanged from a tree. Not a great experience for a growing boy. All of these factors are troubling for him. Being called a demon child enough, he believes it. Let's look, for example, at the Boy Who Cried Wolf story. The story in this game is similar to what we usually hear, just with the end altered. The boy is happy when everyone gets hurt, because they won't believe him. But what about when he's all alone afterwards? For this game to be an insane asylum that was turned into a homeless shelter feels really symbolic about how Will sees himself. Or rather, what he doesn't see. He has always felt ostracized, and like he's been treated that he was mentally ill or just wrong in some way. But he never wanted to face that, so he just hid himself and created these illusions in his head. Granted, some came before, so I wonder how many of them are correlation versus causation with his mind, though. I still think that this makes Will an interesting character, with the rat dynamic of being alone and stuck in a corner. The world through his eyes of a younger, outcast child make for an interesting perspective when we get to his feelings like a cornered rat. He sees the world as lonely, antagonistic to him, and a place that he just doesn't belong. So when he feels cornered, betrayed by the one person in this facility that he thought was like him, led to the death of the one man who actually cared for his well-being. It warps his mind that it is kill or be killed. He never saw another option. Another aspect of this has us looking back to the painting from before, of Oedipus and Laius. Okay, now, how does this relate? Well, it's not so much about the whole marrying his own mother part, but rather predetermination. The idea that running from the hanged man and running away from that idea of becoming such is inescapable. It's all predetermined. Or that's what Will thinks. It's what leads him in one ending to try killing Ed and fighting Moff in the good ending. The idea that to avoid being a hanged man, you must hang another. The whole ideology of becoming happy we see Ed follow, is happiness really the outcome or the process? Is it predetermined? Or rather, to avoid it from being predetermined, you must kill to avoid dying. Kill or be killed. And frankly, I don't see this being so extreme an ideal change for someone whose world is being turned upside down so many times in just one night. I hate to say it, but it really does go into that philosophy behind the killing joke. All that it takes is one bad day. Okay, I'll see myself out. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, check out some of my others, especially the ones in the Strange Man series that will be linked below. If you want to check out more side content, go to the Day Shift. Hopefully by the time this is out, I might have some interesting videos out there. Hopefully. Probably not, this video's taken a while and I still haven't finished those scripts. Anyway, you can also check out my streams, which are usually Saturdays and Sundays, and whenever I announce them on the Discord, where you can participate in polls and videos, streams, and discuss ARGs or games. Also, I just want to say, this video has been a pain in the ass to make. Not even the recording or anything, I haven't even got to the editing, so I don't know how bad that is yet. But just recording the audio. So the Summon House video that I made and will post before this turned out amazingly, honestly. Like, the audio is perfect. It sounds clear, it's exactly what I want from my videos. And I tried to record this and some other scripts like a week after it, and OBS just fucked itself. I have no idea why it stopped working. It just did. My audio sounds like dog shit. You can hear it in the recent streams. I have no idea why it sounds like that. I haven't changed a single setting. I'm upset. But you may be wondering why the audio sounds so much better here, if not a little worse than the Summon House video. It's because this is a website that's just a free voice recorder online. It actually captures my mic well. I don't understand why my mic works perfectly fine, and OBS, which I haven't changed any settings or anything about my environment or mic, and it just fucking stopped working. Yeah, I don't know why. Whatever. Anyway, seriously, thank you all so much for watching and bearing with that little rant. It's been me, Mush. Comments, criticism, and suggestions are always welcome. See you later. Arrivederci.